Okay, I think we'll get started. People are still coming in, but I think enough people are here to start. So welcome. As you know, each class we do a kind of recap of what the class is about, since each of the sessions is taped and it's meant to stand on its own. So I'm Deborah Satz. I'm an instructor for the course along with Paul Brest. I'm a philosophy professor, and Paul is an emeriti law professor. And this is our second time teaching the class. And Kesa Goodman serves as our teaching fellow. I want to just remind you about what the class is about. And it's probably not a surprise, partly because I've said it before, but partly because it's obvious that deep disagreement pervades U.S. democracy, from arguments over immigration, taxation, foreign policy, reparations, the Mideast crisis, to the function of elite higher education and the value of free speech itself. One of the points of this course is to grapple with the fact that disagreement is a feature of democratic societies and not a bug. That is, that disagreement itself is not a reason for concern. We should expect that in a democratic society, one not ruled by a king or an autocrat, that is a society that's based on the equal freedom and status of its members, reasonable people will disagree about many things. Some of the deepest questions of morality, religion, and value are hard to think through. Even people who are well-motivated and conscientious will answer questions pertaining to some of these matters in different ways, perhaps because of their different life experiences, because the facts are hard to pin down and admit of various interpretations, or because they'll make different trade-offs among competing values. But not all disagreement is productive. Sometimes people fail to consider inconvenient facts and close their minds to evidence and reasoning that doesn't support their view. Sometimes, and all too frequently, in online platforms, and sometimes in person, a culture of incivility prevails with respect to those with whom we disagree. And by incivility, I'm not talking about impoliteness. I'm talking about the failure to treat other people with respect merely because they hold different views on issues that we care about. The point of this course is to feature each week scholars who disagree, sometimes very strongly, about major policy issues, but each is committed to follow and present evidence and to try to present reasons that others can understand and acknowledge, and to treat the other person with respect. So Paul is going to speak for a moment, and then I will come back and introduce the topic and today's speakers. But please take a minute to fill out the QR code that'll appear on the screen to confirm your attendance if you're enrolled in the course. And Paul, I'll turn it over to you for a minute.
If you wonder why Deborah and I are repeating our introductory comments, although in shorter form, it's because in addition to those of you who are enrolled in the course, we have a shifting group of auditors. Also, the course will appear online in videos, and who knows who might watch it then. So it's not a bad idea to remind us about the motivation that underlies the course. Deborah explained why disagreement is essential to the maintenance of democratic institutions. I'd like to quote, as I did last week, from a recent article by an opinion writer in the New York Times. Whenever somebody this is all a quote, whenever somebody agrees wholeheartedly with something I write, I die a little inside. I know opinion columnists are supposed to be in the persuasion business, and that makes agreement the coin of the realm. But instant knee-jerk agreement makes me suspicious. The coin is devalued. Yes, I'm happy if you appreciated my columns, but please don't give me an absolutely or nailed it let alone straight fire. I want to douse the straight fires. And please never respond with 100%. I'll take principled dissent, thoughtful counter-argument, even enthusiastic opposition over 100%. If you react to something I've said or written with 100% in written, oral, or emoji form, all you're telling me is that I probably did not persuade you of anything. Instead of changing your thinking, I merely affirmed it. I doubt if agreement of 100% will be a problem in this course, including today's guests. One more item before Deborah introduces the guests. We'll proceed each week's conversation with a poll on relevant questions, on the relevant question, and then ask the same question after the conversation in Q&A. What conclusions you draw from the different results, if in fact they differ, is completely up to you, but if nothing else, it may provide some food for thought after class. And I turn it back to Deborah and the poll question.
And everybody should be filling out the poll, filling out your answer to the poll question. Yeah. Is there a direct link, Kesa? Where is Kesa? I don't know if there's a direct link, and I don't see Kesa at the moment. So it looks pretty overwhelming support for class-based affirmative action. At least as I am reading that diagram. That's shifting a little bit, but. All right, well, let me introduce the topic. So in one way, American universities are and have been the envy of the world. They produce important research which improves human life. They impart needed skills for careers and for living, and they've contributed to the wealth of the nation. It's particularly true in the past, where support for universities and their popularity ran very high. But at the same time, at the moment, universities are less popular, and particularly less popular in this country, than they've been at any time since World War II. A 2024 Gallup poll shows that 68% of Americans think higher education is headed in the wrong direction. Only 20% of Republicans and 56% of Democrats have confidence in higher education. Now, there are many possible reasons for this decline in confidence, a decline that's not limited to higher education, but is attached to all major social institutions. But I want to single out one factor that's relevant to today's discussion. The American dream, the idea that if you work hard and play by the rules, you will have a decent life, is a fading reality for millions of Americans. And too many people have been left out of our country's economic growth. Education is part of this story, as the children of educated and wealthy parents have advantages every step of the way, including with respect to access to places like Stanford. Now, I believe a college education is intrinsically valuable, but it's also associated in America with longer lifespans, safer neighborhoods, access to good K-12 schools, good jobs, and good housing. And college education, especially at highly selective institutions, but also at many less selective ones because of their cost, is a hard road to follow for students whose families come from the bottom of the income distribution. The gaps between the educational attainments of poor and rich children are now greater than the gaps between white and black children. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's where we are. How, if at all, should higher education, especially highly selective universities like Stanford, respond to this situation? Should they practice class-based affirmative action? Why or why not? To discuss this topic, we have two wonderful guests. David Grusky is the Edward Ames Edmonds Professor in the School of Humanities and Sciences, a professor of sociology, and the director of Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality, an expert on poverty, inequality, and social stratification. He's authored more than 5 books and dozens of articles. His work uses big data, administrative and survey data to produce new insights on this topic. John Etchemendy is the Patrick Soupes Professor, also in the School of Humanities and Sciences, a professor of philosophy, and was Stanford's 12th and longest serving provost, serving for an extraordinary 17 years. Under his leadership, Stanford became a much more unified university and expanded its policy footprint through the creation of several large institutes. It also had the biggest increase in financial aid in its history. He's currently the co-director of Stanford's Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence, and he's been a champion of free speech on campus and open inquiry. So we're delighted to have both of them, and David will be presenting first.
Thank you for the nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll get right to it. I'm going to step back. I don't see the slides here, so I'm going to look at these ones. There are 2 arguments I want to make. The first one, is there a way to get the slides up here?
They're here.
Okay.
They're not showing over there?
No. I'm good. Can I talk from here with this?
Yeah, you can talk with that.
Okay, can you hear me? Good? Okay. So 2 arguments to be made. The first argument is that Stanford's admissions process, at least in its current form, wrongly presumes that talent is disproportionately found at the top of the income distribution. The second argument that I want to make is that given that wrong presumption, we need to reform the admissions process, and we need to reform it to ensure that talent is secured from all families and not disproportionately from the top of the income distribution. Okay, let me start with that first argument and start in particular with the facts on the ground as regards where Stanford is now, and similar universities like Stanford, where they're now drawing their students. So we're talking about Ivy plus colleges. This is the Ivy League plus a few other places like Stanford that are seen as in that same league. Within that group of institutions, what we see is that 14.5% of students come from the top 1%. That is more than the total number of students that come from the bottom 50 percentiles. So in the end, that means that the probability of attending an elite private college is 54 times higher for a child in the top 1% compared to a child in the bottom 50%. I'm drawing that from a very important piece by Raj Chetty, Deming, and Friedman. You should consult that piece. A lot of what I'm talking about here is drawn from that work. Okay, so now we might ask, why is it that Stanford has so many students drawn from the top of the income distribution? One reason is what I'm terming the admissions effect. It's the actual active process by which students are selected. So let's consider, I must see this. Yeah. Let's consider students who score at the 99th percentile on the SAT, the top of the distribution, right? Just consider those. If you are at the top of the income distribution, you have a 38% chance of ending up at a place, 40% chance of ending up at a place like Stanford. Still not there, just checking. So a very high chance, if you have the 99th percentile SAT, of ending up at a place like Stanford. As you see, as you move down the income distribution, with that very same score, top of the SAT percentile, you're much less likely to end up at a place like Stanford. Now, this is the combined effect of differential propensities to apply, differential propensities to be admitted, and differential propensities to accept an offer conditional on admission. But the admissions component, the active work of the admissions office, is the dominant force here. So I'm going to focus on that. That's what we can change too, right? So what drives that admissions effect? By which I mean the greater likelihood that a rich high-scoring kid will be selected than a low-income high-scoring kid. What drives that? Three forces, and they're all about collateral traits that come with being a high-scoring student. There are three such collateral traits. We like all of them at Stanford, and we select on them. And they happen to be things that rich people have. Okay, what are those three things? Number one, if you're high-scoring and rich, you're more likely to have a legacy advantage. That's going to help you get in. That's the first collateral trait that you have when you're rich. Second one, you're more likely to be a recruitable athlete, especially at a school like Stanford that specializes in so-called 1% sports. Those are the sports that are engaged in by well-off people. You're more likely to be a recruitable athlete in that sport when you're high-scoring if you're rich. Number three, they're more likely to have high scores on non-academic criteria. This is crucial. This is things like personal traits, extracurriculars, leadership. Rich people are more likely to have those things as seen by the admissions officers, and because of that, they're more likely to be admitted, okay? Three forces that come with being rich and that Stanford positively selects on. This accounts for the advantage, okay, that rich folks have in getting in with the same high scores as the low-income kids, right? Score is constant. Okay. I'm not going to talk about the legacy problem because that's off the table by virtue of the California ban. We can talk about that. I'm not going to talk about the athletics issue, too complicated. So I'm going to focus on the third, very important source of the admissions effect, the use of non-academic criteria. Personal traits, extracurriculars, leadership activities. Here's a key graph. Don't forget this graph. I want you to read. This is a key one. This shows what the payoff is to the various traits on which admissions officers select. Now, note at the right, that big bar there, that's the payoff to having a high academic rating in terms of the things that we care about. A few of them are shown here, like making a lot of money, getting a job in a prestigious firm. Many others were analyzed by the Chetty et al. Team, and basically it shows that when you select on like SAT scores, it means you're going to have a real payoff with respect to the things we care. But look at what happens with the other three traits on which we positively select that come with being rich. They don't have any payoff. That suggests that there might not be any underlying merit when you select on those things. And yet rich people have them, we do select on them, and that's the perverse effect. That's the problem as to what's happening in our admissions office and that of other Ivy Pluses. So applicants with a high academic rating are much more likely to earn a lot and work at a top firm, but applicants with a high non-academic rating are not. It suggests that we're bringing that in as a way to justify selecting folks at the top. And there's no suggestion that there's underlying merit there. They're not doing any better by virtue of having those traits with respect to the outside markers of merit. So here's my first suggested reform. Recalibrate the types of non-academic criteria that Stanford uses to ensure that they do have payoff and aren't therefore just an illicit way of bringing in rich children under the pretense of merit. We should be able to stand by what we select on and say, yeah, it's delivering. These things aren't delivering. They happen to be what rich people have. Well, that looks like we're not doing work for the public good, now does it? So let's recalibrate, let's get it right. If you're going to bring in some additional criteria besides academic ones, they best have payoff, okay? Let's turn now to reform number 2. This is what I'm calling the credential effect. The other main reason why high-income students are overrepresented is that they're more likely to have the requisite credentials, grades, SAT scores. Now, remember, the past point that I made was that we're bringing in criteria that might be seen as illicit, criteria that rich people have and have no payoff. Grades and SAT, super amount of payoff, right? These are illicit criteria in some sense. It's complicated, but I don't have much time. These are at least those criteria that have payoff with respect to the markers that we can measure, like making money, getting prestigious jobs, getting into top graduate schools, things like that. They have payoff, so no one doubts that we ought to be using them. But who gets those high SAT scores? Well, if you take the test, 38% of those at the top get them, get the high SAT scores that we need to take them into Stanford. But look at the bottom of the income distribution, only 2.4%, right? Now you might say, well, that's just the way it is. But the key problem here is that money is needed to convert talent into an SAT score. So we shouldn't just accept that. In order to build a resume that appeals to Stanford, you need money to take your talent, get the SAT score, and then get into Stanford. So look, that's the process down there at the bottom, right? Is it acceptable to select students because their parents had the money to buy a resume that appeals to Stanford? No, that's a money laundering operation. Money is converted into a form, a fancy resume, that elicits the offer. So what we have is what might be called opportunity markets. We have put opportunity on the market. You need to pay to play. You need to have money as a parent to make the human capital investments that translate talent into the SAT score that Stanford recognizes. It's a market for opportunity. Two zones in which that opportunity market has kind of gradually crept up on us. First off, parents need to purchase high-quality childcare, high-quality preschool, and high-amenity and stress-free neighborhoods. They've read the social science. The social science is clear. You need those things in order to get high SAT scores. But they cost money. Second zone, the middle-class zone. Parents need to purchase after-school training, SAT prep, high-quality private or public primary and secondary schools, college consultants. Social science is clear. They have payoff in terms of converting talent into SAT scores. They cost money. So what do we usually do to try to take care of this problem? Most everyone recognizes it's illicit. In the land of opportunity, it's supposed to be the case that any child can get the credentials that Stanford would recognize. It shouldn't be that they need their parents' money to effect that conversion, but they do. So what do we say we should do about that? Well, we should open up opportunity markets. We should maybe give low-income households a bit more money so they can compete and buy the human capital, buy the training that their kids need, like a child tax credit. Or we say, let's reduce the role of opportunity markets. Take opportunity out of the market. Every kid should have high-quality schooling. You don't pay for it, as is currently the case. You should just have access to it free. That's what a lot of people say we should do. Why are these reforms unlikely to happen? Why have they not so far happened? Why is it going to be a long and hard road before they happen? Because they're expensive and because the people who would benefit don't have much power, right? We should continue that fight and that struggle, but before we get there, we might want to say there's another way to go, and I'm going to give you that, and then I'll be off, okay? Change Stanford admissions. Yeah, we should try to change the world, the society that produces this problem in which money is needed to convert talent into high SAT scores. But before we get there, we shouldn't just give up. We can change our admissions process. And what do we want to do? Change the admissions process by separating merit from money. You say impossible. I say no. Here we go. Reform number 2, an affirmative action alternative. Here's what you do. So You take all the applications. I think you're in Stanford admissions office. You take in all the applications that come over the transom, and you divide them into 5 buckets. If the application comes from a bottom quintile family, you put it in bucket 1. Second quintile, bucket 2. Third quintile, bucket 3. Fifth quintile, top of the income distribution, right? So where are you going to have a lot of applications? Over in the 5th one, right? That's going to be sky high. A lot of folks applying from the 5th quintile, right? Because they have the money to convert talent into an SAT score. They think the first one, the bottom quintile, you're not going to have many applications, right? Because very few kids, as we saw, have the requisite credentials. Why bother to apply? But you'll have some. Okay. Now what do? You take 350 students from each pile. Okay? That's 1/5 of the Stanford incoming class. So in the bottom pile, this is the bottom quintile, the lowest income families. You take 1/5 of the class from that bottom pile. It's a small pile, right? Still 1/5 of the class from that pile. These are going to be amazing kids, right? Super high SAT scores still, just not many of them. We take a big share of those kids, right? Then you move to the next quintile. They are the winners. We take the 350 best. They're the winners in a middling resource environment, and so forth. The 5th pile, the sky-high one, these are winners in a high-resource context. They had the wind at their backs. Every advantage was given to them. Oh my gosh, they're going to be great. We'll just take 350 from that pile too, okay? I'm going to skip this, skip this, skip this, skip this, skip this, skip this, because I know Deborah wants me off the stage. I'm going to skip this. And here we go. This is for you, Deborah. Existing practices in the world are often based on a very thin facade. They can crumble quickly. Leaders like Deborah have a lot of power. John too. Okay, so a small move by a bold leader, Deborah, a small move can change everything. Everything collapses. It's a norm cascade. The social science on this is also clear. So here's what would happen. It's very hard to defend what we do now, I would say. And so if Deborah did this, other institutions would be on the defensive. They would have to justify this illicit practice. It could spread quickly across elite institutions. It could even spread to government employers and other employers. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So I'm really not going to be able to see this. Huh. Okay. So thank you, David. It's a wonderful, wonderful points. And the Chetty article is just an amazing article. I agree. Now, I'm going to talk about 2 separate topics. Do I? Yeah, I'm on there. I'm going to talk about 2 separate topics. One is the case for legacy admissions, that is, for legacy-aware admissions, as we practice it at Stanford currently. And the other is the case for what I'll call college stratification. What I mean by that is having colleges across the country that have radically different demands, preparation demands, academic preparation demands on its applicants. So, with respect to legacy admission, by the way, I have 2 caveats. One is I'm only going to be talking about Stanford and how Stanford does legacy admissions. I don't know how other universities do it. I'll give you a picture of how it's done at Stanford. I see we have a former dean of admissions in the audience, and she could correct me if I'm wrong. So I will only talk about Stanford and how Stanford uses legacy. And secondly, the second caveat is that when I was a senior in high school, I applied to Stanford. And I was a legacy. My mother went to Stanford, graduated from Stanford. I was valedictorian, and I didn't get in, unlike all of you guys. So So I have a particular perspective on legacy admissions, having gone through that experience. But in any event, let's start talking about legacy. So first of all, it's important to know how admissions works at Stanford and many other similar kind of universities. An image that a lot of people have is something like this. We have all these applicants, and you can kind of order them in terms of the most prepared, the most capable, the most academically accomplished, all the way down to the least. And you know, it's pretty much a linear ordering. Now, if that's the case, the best way to admit, if it's merit-based admission, would be to take the top N applicants, where N is the number of openings you have, the size of your class. Now, if this is how admissions really works, then if you do legacy admissions, if you take into consideration the fact that somebody is a legacy and admit them because of that, then you're going to do something very unfair. You're going to displace more highly qualified students, applicants, for the legacy applicants, right? And that's something that people get very upset about. Okay, that's kind of the picture that people have of admissions. That's not at all what admissions really looks like. So I'm going to give a description of sort of a more accurate picture. It is cartoonish, but it's a more accurate picture of how admissions works at Stanford and at most elite institutions. First of all, so here's the applicant pool. Now, there's always in the applicant pool there a handful of people that are, I've called them superstars. These are people that, you know, won the International Math Olympiad or performed at Carnegie Hall, you know, the kind of people you don't like, right? No. So there's always a handful of them, okay? And we'll just put them up top. Now, next you have a very large group of applicants, of students, who are absolutely outstanding. They're academically absolutely outstanding and prepared. And these are straight A students. They have SATs right at the top, you know, 99 percentile. They have, you know, glowing letters from their teachers. They have outstanding credentials in every way. So these are the things all those things that David was talking about. Now, any of these students in that top group would excel at Stanford. But really, in some sense, they're entirely indistinguishable when it comes to academic qualifications or academic merit or academic preparation. They're all right up there. So there's no ordering there. Now, slightly below, there's an even larger group of academically very strong students. These are students, maybe they have 1 or 2 Bs. Maybe they got 95 on their SAT instead of 99, you know, and so forth. So they're just a little bit academically not at the very top. Much larger group. But they're all actually capable. They would thrive at Stanford. They would graduate. They would do just fine if they were admitted. And then you have a very, very large group, even larger. The sizes are not accurate, right? So then you have a very large group of people who are really not qualified for Stanford. They don't have the academic preparation. They just wouldn't be able to succeed. Okay, I call the first 2 groups the competitive groups. So they're competitive, or they're admissible. Now, so what do we do as to decide what we're going to do? Well, let's first do the easy thing. Let's admit the superstars. That sounds like a good idea. And turn down the people who are completely unqualified for Stanford, who would not succeed. Okay, that's the easy part. The problem is that the size of our class looks more like this. That is, we could not, 3/4 of the most highly qualified students wouldn't fit into our class. We have a size of 1/4 of those applicants. So how do we proceed? So that's our class so far, and we've got to build a class. And so, well, you know, these students are actually not indistinguishable. I said they're indistinguishable or relatively indistinguishable from the standpoint of academic preparation. They're not indistinguishable, they're all individuals. So let's consider some of the characteristics, some of the ways that they are different. Now, how do you pick Lily rather than Tommy if they're both equally impressive or academically prepared? Well, it's basically a game of tie-breaking because they're equivalent in academic preparation. So now I've picked out here some of the kinds of characteristics that we use to break ties. Now, first are the recruited athletes and so forth. So those are the recruited athletes. Well, the recruited athletes, you know, if they both are academically so prepared, they're admissible, they're competitive, and they excel athletically, then we'll probably take them. Now, remember, these are not people that are unqualified. These are all people that are absolutely qualified. Next, there are the first-generation low-income students, FLE students, as we sometimes call them here at Stanford, first-generation low-income. Well, those students, if they are competitive, if they are truly competitive with the Stanford pool, we're going to take them. We take them all. Everyone that's competitive. Now, let's go on. Let's say, so we have quirky students. What are quirky students? Well, those are students that stand out for some reason, some other reason. You know, maybe one of them, started the largest kazoo orchestra in the world, and another one comes from North Dakota. It's the only applicant from North Dakota. There is a North Dakota boost in our admissions, I promise you. Better to come from North Dakota than California. Okay, so let's take some of them. We don't take all of them. Let's take some of them. Makes the class more interesting. Okay, now, how about legacy students? These are students whose parents, one or the other of their parents, went to Stanford, graduated from Stanford. Well, first of all, let's look at the top ones, the ones that are in the absolutely top group of students. Well, we'll take those. And notice that by taking those, we are not taking the place of any more qualified student. We are not taking the place that would otherwise be taken by any first-generation low-income student or by any student who is more qualified, because those are all at the top. Now, how about these ones down here? So they aren't quite the very top. So what we do there is we'll take some of them and we won't take others. So maybe this one on the left, you know, her parents are loyal volunteers, alumni volunteers. They organize their class reunions and so forth. Maybe the one on the right consistently every year gives a large donation for financial aid. Okay, so that makes them step out. The others, you see this guy on the bottom row? That's me. I didn't make it. Okay, then what do we do? Well, we take from the very top group, we fill out the class. Okay, so. Then sadly, we send what they used to call the skinny envelope to all the others. You guys don't have envelopes anymore, but it used to be that if you got accepted, you got a big packet, And if you didn't get accepted, like me, you got a little letter that said you're not accepted, right? So we tell the others that, sorry, but you aren't accepted. And that includes, mind you, over 1,000 of the legacies, legacy applicants. So now let me talk about the numbers for a second. So legacy applicants to Stanford, we have 276, that's about 12.7% in the admitted class. Now 276 out of over 1,500 legacy applicants. So, I mean, there's a lot of legacy applicants that just get turned down. First generation admits, we have 447, over 20% of the class are first generation admits. And that's larger than the percentage of legacy admits. Now let's take some of the conclusions or make a few things explicit. First of all, as I've said, we admit all first-generation low-income students that are competitive with the admitted class. We do not admit all legacy applicants who are competitive. In other words, legacy admits don't displace competitive first-generation applicants. If they displace anyone, it's probably equally privileged applicants whose parents went to, say, an Ivy League school or Cal or wherever. Legacy admissions is basically, for the most part, simply a tiebreaker between comparably qualified applicants. Now, what are the benefits of having a legacy-aware admission policy? Well, first of all, it absolutely strengthens the community and loyalty among the alumni. I mean, think of this. People think to themselves, look, if Stanford isn't willing to give my child at least some extra consideration, why should I volunteer or donate anything to the university? If you're not loyal to me, why should I be loyal to you? So it strengthens the community, it binds them more to Stanford. It enhances, and that's good for all the, it enhances the alumni network. So one of the things you get when you come to Stanford is there's an alumni network out there that will mentor you, advise you, maybe give you a job, who knows. And that's an important benefit that every student at Stanford receives, thanks to, in part, legacy admissions. Oh, and it increases alumni giving and makes our generous financial aid program possible. And by the way, that is good for 47% of our students who are on financial aid. It's particularly good for the first-generation low-income students because they are on the largest amount of financial aid. Now, we spend about this past year, we spend about $260 million on financial aid. About $180 million of that comes from gifts. The largest part comes from the Stanford Fund, which are these small gifts that come in from our alumni, our loyal alumni. And there's some of the alumni have given endowment gifts to the financial aid program. That's what allows us to have such a generous financial aid. Now, the other thing, people sometimes think, well, legacies don't, they got to boost up so they don't do as well at Stanford. No, they actually outperform the average in terms of their GPA. Okay, so that is the case for legacy admissions. Let's look at the case for college stratification. Now, what do I mean by college stratification? Well, first of all, as Deborah said, the US has the strongest university system in the world, unquestionably. mean, this is not just us saying this, but you'll find people from all over the world acknowledging that. Now, most people think that the reason for that is, if you look at the rankings of universities, you know, the US is disproportionately represented at the top. 7 of the top 10 universities, research universities, are US universities. You know, like 35 of the top 50 are US universities. That's usually what people mean when they say, well, we have the strongest university system. I don't think that is the strength of our system at all. It's not because of the top universities. It's because of these two things. First of all, we have the most diverse system of colleges and universities in the world. We have publics, we have privates, liberal arts colleges, specialty colleges, those that specialize in engineering, specialize in fine arts. We have community colleges. Some are highly selective, some accept all high school graduates, and some are in between. The second thing is that individuals are free to take a wide variety of educational paths through the system. So late bloomers, for example, can start in a community college and end up at Harvard Medical School. So suppose you're somebody who did not get your act together in high school. You're 22 years old and you finally get your act together and you say, God, I want to become a doctor. You can start at a community college, transfer to maybe a UC, transfer to, and then apply to Harvard and actually get in. This happens all the time. Those who are ready after high school to take some people are ready immediately after high school to take the most rigorous course load and course of study, and they can go to fast-paced, accelerated institutions. Now, the net result of these two things is we have the best system in the world for capturing talent whenever it blooms. Now, ignoring disparate levels of preparation destroys the benefits of a specialized, stratified college system. It makes it impossible. To take an example, you know, Thomas Jefferson High School in Virginia is one of the top high schools in the country. It's a special science and technology high school. Well, they recently, some parents got upset because too many of the spots in Thomas Jefferson were being taken by Asian kids, you know, who got in because of the admissions test. And so they said, well, we want to correct this. And so they suggested, well, let's take everybody who wants to get in and then just have a lottery. We'll just do it, you know, randomly by chance. And guess what? Now, thankfully, they stopped. They went back. Guess what? You cannot have a Thomas Jefferson High School, a magnet school. It demagnetizes when you do that. You can no longer teach high-level science because you don't have high-level students. So, second point, admitting non-competitive students to a highly competitive college benefits no one, not the students, not the university, and not the country. Unprepared students end up disproportionately dropping out, they don't succeed, or what I call dropping down. That is, they come in and they want to be engineers, or they want to be physicists, or whatever, and they hit the hard math courses, say, and they end up dropping down to an easier major, one that doesn't require some of the harder courses. Maybe a philosophy major, who knows, right? So they drop down and they don't end up majoring in what they wanted to major in. Now, this is not good for anybody. So I reply to David that I agree with him that the system is not fair. It is an embarrassment to the United States that that academic preparation is so tied to income. I agree with that, and that should be changed. But this is not the way to change it. Achieving equity by de-emphasizing academic preparation is simply going to hurt students, it's going to hurt the colleges, weaken the colleges, and it's going to weaken the United States. Okay, so that's it.
So, David, do you want to respond at all to John? And I have questions for each of you, but, yeah, yes, and you, yeah.
I would love to. I want to take on the point that you made at the very end that suggested that by proceeding in the way that I discussed, we would compromise on the academic preparation and quality of the students. And I should say, John very generously shared those slides with me before, so I was able to prep a bit. And so I have some statistics. So thank you. No, but because it's a reasonable concern, totally reasonable, right? So 4 million students currently in the US in the 12th grade. These are kind of at risk of coming to Stanford, right? About 1/5, 800,000, are in the bottom quintile of the US household income distribution. So 800 from the bottom, okay? Of these, and I mentioned this statistic before, 0.06%, 4,800 will have an SAT score of 1,300 or more. So to fill a fifth of our class, our incoming class, we just need 350 of those 4,800, just 7%. Now you might say, the real threshold isn't 1,300, it's 1,500, right, for SAT. Then about 700 students would be available, and we'd need to take half of those. But my point here only, is that we don't need to compromise one whit. These are students who are going to be incredible. Why? They had no money, no wind at their back, and they still got the highest SAT score possible. Now, I'm using SAT score just as a stand-in. There are other things you'd want to take into account, but they all depend on money also. So the main point holds. We will have the people we need at Stanford without compromising one whit. In fact, if you can triumph without any money standing behind you, oh my gosh, we want them, because they've done it against all odds. So no compromise.
So David, can I respond to your response? So first of all, you're assuming that all of the people in that category are applying to Stanford. And yes, we could get 20% that would actually qualify. I don't deny that. And I think, and in fact, we have a program, an outreach program to try to encourage as many low-income, first generation or low-income students to apply. We do that now. And we get as many as we can. And then, as I said, those that are qualified, those that are competitive, we admit, period. Now, I don't know what you want us to do. Do you want us to, we can't magically create more students, qualified students that are applying to Stanford. Some of them are not applying to college at all, unfortunately. Some of them are applying elsewhere. And we're not going to get all of those people. But nonetheless, we do get a fair number, 400 and whatever I said, do in fact come to Stanford, are admitted and come to Stanford. So I don't see that you're at all countering my point.
May I reply to the reply?
Yes, but
No.
then I'm gonna
And then we're stopping,
break
John. Good point. I would stress, first off, that if the word got out that we're accepting a very high rate of those applicants who meet kind of the standard on academic credentials like SAT, if that word got out, it will change the number of students who take the SAT test, who prepare for the SAT test. They'll say it's not a rigged game anymore. Stanford's open for business. They actually do what they say they do. What in our founding documents, we said we were supposed to do, which is to find talent wherever it is. Stanford's committed to it.
So David,
Yeah?
that's naive. So, let me tell you a
This
story.
is civil debate.
Let me tell you a story, okay? When we introduced the new, extremely generous financial aid program, this was where if your family income is below 100,000, we pay your tuition. You don't have to pay a penny of tuition. If your family income is below 150,000, you don't have to pay tuition. You don't have to pay room and board. We'll even give you some money to buy a computer and to buy books. Okay. We did everything we could to communicate that to the U.S. And guess what? You talk to anybody, go out there and ask people, how much does it cost for a low-income student to go to Stanford? They won't know about that, in spite of our efforts. Now, why is that? Well, the reason for that is very simple. They're not listening. Until they either have a student a senior in high school, they're not paying attention to that. Until if they're younger than that, if the student is younger than that, they pay no attention to those things. And so we do try to get this out. We say it, communicated it as much as we can, and it doesn't get through. We still don't get the numbers that you're claiming we will get.
May I respond to John's response to my response?
I think I'm going to intervene because there's also going to be a lot of questions from the audience, I'm sure. So I have let me start with a question for each of you. I mean, separate. So, but I'll ask them together. So for David, you want to equalize across income groups, but there are many ways you could divide the population. You could divide it by race and ethnicity. You could divide it by gender. You could divide it by state. Why do you pick income, and why wouldn't that be controversial that you're picking that group for this system as opposed to other groups where we know there are also systematic inequalities? So that's for you, just about justifying the model. And then for John, so there is a crisis of confidence in higher education. And some of it is related to the fact that people feel like the system is rigged and the higher ed system is not doing anything to really substantially unrig it. You've made an argument that admissions at Stanford is not the way to unrig it, but do you think we have a responsibility to help unrig it, and if so, what is that? So, whatever order you want to take.
Well, I think we do have a responsibility to try to unrig it, and I think that the way we unrig it is we try to change it below. We try to change the pipeline. We try to change K-12 education. We try to change policies that will enable more students to go to, better high schools, for example. I mean, ideally, as David pointed out, all the schools in the U.S. would be of equal quality. That's not going to happen. But you can make it possible for more students to go to the Thomas Jefferson's or whatever the local magnet school is, or to move to another school. We do everything we can to make it the case that when it comes time for admissions to the university, we do not see the disparity that David rightly complains about.
Okay. Deborah's question was, there are lots of problems. Not just the income problem, but there's a problem with respect to racial equity, there's a problem with respect to regional equity. The list is long. Why money, she said. I think, first off, by emphasizing the money side of the equation, it's not to say we shouldn't continue to do good work in repairing other inequities. This is just one part of the admissions process that I'm featuring, but it wouldn't mean that we wouldn't go on with a holistic review, consistent with what the Supreme Court says we can do, in which we would take into account the adversities that people are facing that would stem from a host of different sources, not just income. So this is just part of the process. But why is it an important part of the process? It's an important part of the process because the way in which we get training is to put money on the table. It's the coin of the realm, right? If you want to train your kid, you got to get into a neighborhood that has the fancy schools that will attract the attention of Stanford. If you want to train your kid, you got to pay for high quality preschool, high quality childcare. All these things matter. It's about money. So money is going to have to be an important part of the setup, and I wanted to feature that aspect of the type of system in which we live in.
Speaking of money, one part of your argument that really bothered me was you showed that these characteristics, that one chart where you showed that the characteristics, the academic characteristic, you got much more income, either you're more likely to be in the top 1% or you're more likely to be at a large firm. And these other ones were kind of unrelated mostly to those. Why is that the measure that makes a difference? Why is that a measure that makes a difference to Stanford? We want, for example, we have an education school. We train a lot of teachers. We don't expect them to be in the top 1%. Why isn't the right measure excelling at Stanford academically, finding the path that you want to pursue and pursuing it, whether that involves money or not? So I think you're just using the wrong measure to argue that these are irrelevant characteristics.
I agree. And let me talk about what transpired behind. It's not my research. It's Raj Chetty's, John Friedman, and David Deming. So they should get credit for this extraordinary work, but they should also be held responsible for the assumptions behind it, as you point out. And so when that work first came out, you know what I said? Just what you said, John. We should have a measure of doing good, because we care about that. That might not entail any money at all, but we want people to commit to the collective good in a variety of ways that wouldn't show up in the measures that you have. And he worked hard to develop a measure of doing good. There are now, it's hard to do that, but he included, for example, prestigious public interest firms as one of the outcomes we care about. So I showed you a few of the outcomes, but if you go to the paper, and I encourage all of you to do that, there's a lot behind them, and some of them tap the kinds of outcomes that you mentioned. It's not just about making money. It's not just about getting into prestigious firms. We care about that, but we care about other stuff too. The key point coming out of that paper, though, is for all these sorts of outcomes that we might measure, there's no payoff to invoking the types of criteria that Stanford and other elite institutions use seemingly to justify bringing in more from the top of the income distribution. Those are things that they have. They have no seeming payoff downstream. Why the heck are we using them?
But David,
It's a smoking gun.
David, I gave you an argument for why legacy admissions makes sense and why it has its benefits. And notice there was not a single word about increasing the income of the students, right? So it has to do with very different things. It is for the institution's benefit and for all of the students of the institution's benefit that we have a system that creates an alumni community that then, as we sometimes say, the Stanford family, that then gives an advantage to every one of our Stanford students. Low income, high income, whatever, they have the advantage of having a Stanford community that will help them, mentor them, advise them, maybe give them a job. So I'm not, I gave that argument and there was no mention of dollars.
Money,
right?
yeah. Well, I guess I am in great sympathy with the point that Deborah made on this. It troubles me deeply that there's a reputational crisis among our institutions. And so the legacy argument is a special argument. I totally get you there. And I think the benefits that you mentioned are swamped by the delegitimation of these institutions if we continue doing legacy.
Right. I mean, I think, nobody is more acutely aware of the image problem that the universities have, the lack of trust in universities, the lack in trust in our education, the lack of trust in our research, and some of that is deserved. I must say, some of that is deserved. But the thing is, people are wrong, now I'm not talking about Stanford, about university education. The difference, what's called the college premium, the amount that you will earn if you go to college, and this is across the country, I don't care if it's Stanford or community colleges. If you graduate from college, you will earn, on average, twice what you would earn if you had simply stuck with a high school diploma. And if you look at the types of jobs where you get an income boost from being in college, they're every kind. Stockroom clerk. If you've been to college, you make money, lifetime money, more than if you were a high school graduate. Basically, every profession, with the exception of civil service professions, where it's defined, where the income is defined by other considerations. So how is it that we're not benefiting the students that come through? And when I say we, I'm not talking about Stanford, I'm talking about all 800 and something colleges and universities in this country. We are absolutely benefiting them. Now, that message is not getting out.
I think I'm going to let Paul ask a question, and then we will open it up to the audience, so you should stand up behind the mic. So we'll start Paul.
So I have a small question for John and then a larger question for both of you. The small question is, you said that legacy students do better than their peers. Do you have any theory about why that's the case?
No. So, basically, I think when you look at the legacy pool, not surprisingly, they are very, very accomplished, and on average. And so probably what we're admitting is the legacies that get in are probably, academically a little bit more advanced than the average of the class as a whole. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
So the bigger question is, and it's really initially for David anyway, suppose you're observing a classroom as it is today at Stanford, and Stanford adopts your admissions procedure, and you now observe the classroom as it exists with those students. Would it look different at all? And if so, how would it look different? And I don't mean the faces. I mean the conversations, the dialogue that goes on in the classroom.
I think the benefits would be profound. Let me just lay out some of them. We would have a more diverse set of experiences in play, and the benefits to diversity are substantial. Point one. It would be a new type of, we should continue all of our work with respect to racial diversity and other types of diversity, but now we'd have more income diversity in play. Wonderful. For all the reasons that diversity has payoff. Point one. Point two. The kids who are coming from the low income environment survived against and flourished against all odds. They did not have the wind at their back. They did not have parents investing in tutors, in consultants, in preschool, in fancy schools, and yet, they excelled. And so I want those people around here because they're amazing, even more amazing than the 1% kids who had every advantage and excelled. They're great too, but come on. The ones who advantaged when everything was, the ones who excelled when everything was against them, I want them in my classroom. That's amazing.
But David, I don't think we do that already. We already look at the background, where they're coming from, and if they're coming from a difficult background and nonetheless are academically qualified, absolutely, we admit them. There's no question. I mean, I remember one student who became president of the class who was homeless during high school and still managed to present a credible competitive application. And we grabbed her. You know, she was terrific. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman. I've kept in touch with her for a long time. Now, we do that already, so I don't see why you think it will suddenly be different if we use your admissions.
I think there's a measurement issue here that makes us talk a bit at cross purposes. We do a wonderful job with first-generation students, and we should continue to do that. But that is not the same as low-income students. And money is, like I said, the coin of the realm. There are many sources of inequity, and one of them is that it's very difficult if you don't have college education in your background to nonetheless get to college. I get that, and we should continue our wonderful work on that dimension, and you point to it quite rightly. But there's another dimension, quite separate, money, on which we do much worse, and it's very, very consequential, and we are losing because we don't adequately take that
I mean,
into
this
account.
relates to the legitimacy point, so if I could just.
Let me just say
okay.
something about the money. There is somewhat a reason for, you know, we have need-blind admissions. We specifically do not allow the information of your parental income to be available to the admissions office, so that we have need-blind admissions, and then, of course, the financial aid office gets the information about your family's income. So that is a problem. We don't, you know, it's not as if we can pay attention to that unless we want to give up need-blind admissions.
Well, so that's, yeah, so one group that really is missing is the middle of the income distribution, because we target the bottom of the income distribution, then we take a lot from the top, but we are really missing the middle, and that is connected to the crisis of legitimacy, where a lot of people think, I have no chance. So I want to open it up for questions from the audience. Don't be shy. And there are a lot of people in the audience who know a lot about this issue and have things to say, so please come up.
Goodness. Hi, I would like to first off thank you both for coming to speak with us. I think it was a really engaging lecture. My question is for Professor Grusky. Earlier in the second presentation, it was mentioned that a lot of students on financial aid, that over 180 million, I think, was the number, come from donations from past alumni. How do you suppose, if we start increasing admissions for low-income students, how do you suppose we subset that money that we're receiving from so many alumni?
That is a great question. You know, I thought John was going to go there, and he didn't. And so I'm glad that you did, because that's the right question to ask. And I had thought the big question in play is not whether or not we should do this. Of course we should do this. It's how the heck are we going to afford it? There are two types of costs in play. We might lose some of the legacy money, as you pointed out. Also, insofar as we continue our commitment to providing full financial aid to those who need it, we're going to have to do more of that. And so there's two money problems in play. I'm trying to solve one money problem, but if this were to happen, we'd engender two others. And so we would have to look long and hard. There are some things we do at Stanford that I would not want us to stop doing, because they're amazing, important, changing the world, and having huge payoff. So we need to identify those things that are less important than what I suggested, and trim those. And there's going to be costs. But I think, and I think John Levin agrees, there's some fat in the budget that we could trim. And so I think that's where we look. We look for the least payoff stuff, and we're going to lose that stuff, and that's a shame, but this is more important. So yeah, we'd have to make some cuts in some of the things we do. But just don't get rid of the most important stuff.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm an education policy scholar, and one question I have for the both of you is, you're saying that you accept all of the qualified applicants from these groups. But I think, David, you made this point. SAT scores, GPA, amount of AP classes you take, and college essays are all tied to income. Like every single one of those metrics, we know that they improve if your parents have money. So my question for you is, how do we even determine who a qualified applicant is. I understand that there's need blood admission, but if your parents are paying for you to have an SAT tutor, if they're paying for someone to write your essay, if you go to a wealthier school district that has more AP classes, it can be hard to have an even playing field for comparison.
Well, you know, first of all, in some of those things you said, if you're paying somebody to write your essay, if we find out that, your admissions will be rescinded. I mean, you'll be kicked out. That's cheating on your application. Now, yes, there is this connection. I don't deny that. But what is the best predictor of success at Stanford? Success being defined as getting good grades, graduating from Stanford. Two best predictors are GPA in high school, SAT scores. Okay, so that's the point. You know, it is unfortunate that in this country, the income is so tied to high SAT scores, or vice versa. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way, and we need to figure out how to change that. But as long as that is the case, we accept the students that we think will thrive at Stanford and graduate. There's not helping anybody to accept somebody who then drops out because they can't handle it.
I think an addendum to that point is that we should proceed in an evidence-based way. And I mean that in the following sense. It is likely the case that when you do not have money, you're going to have difficulties producing a resume that looks as impressive as that of people who do have money. But if you bring them in and you show that they nonetheless excel across this wide gamut of outcomes about which we care, then we can start calibrating our admissions to those types of evidence at the input side that generate what we want on the output side. And we can use big data to make sure that we can correct for the types of advantage that are secured through the illicit effects of money as against those types of advantage that aren't. I think we can do it in an evidence-based way. I'm not saying it's easy, but there's so much at stake that I think there's a way to proceed with success on that front.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for a very vibrant discussion. I wanted to follow up on the final remark by Dean Satz about the middle-income families. I'm one of those people from a middle-income family, and I am a transfer now here because the first time around, I didn't apply to Stanford, but I got into another Ivy League school, and then it was too expensive, so I decided to go to another school for 2 years at a lower cost, and then transfer after 2 years. Is that something that you see as a feature of the system, or would you like to ideally have kind of equality in acceptance of admission offers across the income percentiles? And what solutions in mind do you have to address that, if that's something you're interested in working towards?
So for one thing, let me point out that the kind of path you described that you have taken, the kind of path that you describe is exactly what I think is one of the great strengths of our universities, our college system in the U.S. It allows that, that you don't have to be ready to go to Stanford or be able to afford Stanford immediately in order to end up with a Stanford degree or with a Harvard degree or whatever. So that is, I think that's a wonderful story. It happens all the time, and I think it's fine. I think it's great. I mean, most countries, you are tracked from the early high school or whatever, or maybe late high school. You take a test and you're tracked, and then the rest of your educational experience is determined by the outcome of that test. That's not how it is here, and that's good.
Thank you. Yeah, I do have one point to add, in that insofar as one adopted the affirmative action approach that I outlined, one of the big problems that Deborah and you pointed out is the middle class are among the biggest losers, as it were, from the current approach. It is very hard to get in. The acceptance rate is very low, even for those who have the requisite credentials. And so this would change that.
Thank you.
Hello. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a senior here at Stanford studying data science. I helped section lead one of the sections for this class, but in regards to this topic, I used to go to Stuyvesant High School, and I'm first gen and go here, so I'm very familiar with, I guess, discussing race and equity in terms of elite admissions, just because it was a big part of my upbringing, being in sort of that spotlight of the New York Times constantly coming in and reporting racial inequities. But I guess I wanted to pose this question to both of you. So over the past couple of years in New York City, I've seen sort of the breaking of programs that create opportunities, such as Gifted and Talented. There are a lot less programs like that within the city, and I'm sure this reflects in other areas in the country as well. And so sort of, I guess what I'm trying to get at is we've seen sort of the diminishment or a decrease in the amount of opportunities that allow students who are first and low income or of different backgrounds to get qualified enough to come to a school like Stanford across the board, and have even seen it in these elite high schools where Brooklyn Tech, Stuyvesant are way less racially diverse than they were in the 1990s, the 1980s. And so I guess going before college and thinking back before college, what are some things that you think are important in regards to this beyond just like the income and all these other factors that have been discussed that can be added to that college conversation? Just because I've seen it be discussed in terms of the high school, elite high school admissions conversation, but have not really seen solutions or sort of thought processes about, okay, we have these big places for first and low income students to come in and prosper, yet they should be getting more racially diverse, yet they're getting racially less and less diverse as the years go on, especially today in 2024.
Right. So let me pick up one part of that, or one, I want to ask, so this is inspired by your question, but I want to ask David a question. So one thing that you could do to help equalize the opportunity in the pre-college level is to introduce vouchers, a voucher system. So where every student can use the voucher to get, to help pay for a private high school education. And that would allow people that are poorer to get in. So I want to ask David, do you support that? I mean, that's not a traditional sort of liberal democratic thing to say, but I do believe that it is an important way we could help equalize the opportunity problem. I'm putting you on the spot, David.
Fair enough. Great question, by the way. I think the problem is that hybrid systems are very difficult to make work. That is, if it's a hybrid public-private system, what you do is gut the public system, and the two can't join together. You can go full-on neoliberal, in which everyone is given a voucher, and we have no public system at all, and I can imagine there's a way to make that work. Or you can go full-on public, in which case you then have to ensure that public schools are of equal quality no matter what the neighborhood. The hybrid system, I would say, has been shown to be very problematic. So if you have to, are you saying full-on voucher and we just eliminate the public system?
No, I actually think that what happens is you encourage competition, and why you assume that the public system is not capable of bringing up the quality of its schools, I don't quite understand. Why
Money.
don't you?
Money.
Money is actually not, the correlation between the money that goes into schools and the quality of the schools is just nil. There's no correlation. Look at, Washington, D.C. has the highest amount of funding going into their K-12 system.
But John, it depends on the students and their family background.
Sure.
It's much cheaper to educate students from stable families, high income, enough food and health care than it is to educate kids.
Sure.
And so.
Sure. But that doesn't take away from the advantage of what vouchers would do in equalizing the opportunity. And I don't think it would necessarily destroy. If it destroyed the public schools,
I
that
think the
tells you something.
voucher discussion might take us a little bit far away.
Yeah.
I do
So
think.
this was a great question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's a great question, and, and there, I mean, it just reminds us again that there's, I mean, David, you said it's too expensive, or it's, but it is the right solution in the end, is if you could invest in K-12 education in this country and actually equalize more upfront than trying to equalize at the, college level. And it's probably
Absolutely.
more cost-effective as well to do it that way.
This is just a stopgap until we do what's right. I totally agree.
All right, next.
Hi, thank you so much for the discussion. My question has two parts. Firstly, for Mr. Gruski, I was wondering, to me it seems like there's a broad correlation between income and how perhaps like academically successful it is for a student to get into a school like Stanford, but not a perfect one, in that it doesn't accurately reflect perhaps individuals who have like a lower yearly income but have like really high investments that they're selling off, or perhaps parents that aren't paying for their children's education. Are we using income because it's just the next best thing? And then like separately, I'm also wondering, are we choosing to discuss reforms in universities like Stanford's admissions processes because it's sort of not probable that other reforms in policy and in government would occur? Because it seems like we're sort of addressing a symptom to the real issue at hand, and that a better way, like John mentioned, would be to obviously make education, like school districts are a huge problem because of the unequal funding, for example, or just other issues broadly over society.
Yeah, that's a great two-pronged question. Let me take the second prong first, and reiterate, I think, total agreement with you, that job one should be to repair those inequalities that created opportunity markets in the first place and made it necessary for people to put money on the table in order to train their kids. We know we could do it, and other countries do a far better job of it than we do. There are a variety of pathways to get there, and my only point would be, until we get there, we can't say, oh, we shouldn't do anything at Stanford. We actually can do something as a stopgap solution until those more fundamental reforms are undertaken. Now I forget the first part of your question.
Just that income might not be the...
Yeah, thank you. Totally agree with you on that one. Income is a measure that I focused upon only because it's available, say, in tax data. One would be able to assess the income of families. It is much more difficult to, say, assess the wealth, but I agree that wealth, if we could assess it, should be definitely in the equation, because that's another asset that families can bring to bear to convert talent into what Stanford would see as merit. So the same argument would apply. It's just a measurement problem.
Hello, super interesting perspectives, but I have a much broader question that was not at all discussed, that I originally thought at least one of you would agree with me on, but it turns out not. At the end of the day, education, and Stanford in particular, Stanford is a private institution, right? Education is something that obviously we're paying for. It's something that we want our kids to have, we want to have ourselves. And just a bit of background, I also didn't get in Stanford for my undergrad. I'm a grad student now, very lucky to be here, low income, Eastern European student, whatnot. And I'm probably here because of such policies that not tied to legacy or anything like that. But then at the end of the day, I'm here with the hope that one day when I have children of my own, I am working very many hours a week so that I can have more money, so that I can give them better opportunities, so that they can do even better than I am doing, maybe get in here for undergrad. So not necessarily related to legacy, but you're proposing that at the end of the day, it should not matter how much money your parents are making. There should be like equal numbers of students from each wealth group, and I just have an inherent problem with that. Then like education fully just becomes a, I don't know, this leans towards communism for me at the end of the day in some way. Why would people want to make more money? Why would people want to work and do anything if that's not to give their children better opportunities than they themselves had? And then further to that, why are we even discussing this for Stanford, which is a private institution? There's a public school system, there's public universities. And then just to the point of other countries are maybe doing this better than us, than the US, in terms of giving everyone a K through 12 better level of education. Yeah, but no one has anything that compares to the US university system, and maybe that's why. You give everyone really good high school education, and then you admit everyone into universities, for example, what happens in a lot of Belgium, Germany, etc., and then students just can't cope with it. The dropout rates are insane. Like, Technical University of Munich has like 70% of first-year students dropping out.
Why would we do this? I like your question. It's the biggest, most fundamental question. Why do I think this is something we should do? It's because talent is to be found across the income distribution. We will be better as a university and we'll do better by the country if we find talent wherever it is and unmask the concealing effect of money. So that's why. Now, I totally with you. We have a very good educational system. Is it optimizing? Is it doing the best possible job of ferreting out talent wherever it might be? No, we can do better. And that's always our job, do better. So is it pretty good? Yeah, it's pretty good. Is it deeply flawed in a variety of ways that are correctable? Yes. So let's correct them.
So I want to just point out that it may be, and I do believe, that talent is equally distributed, is kind of independent of income. That doesn't mean academic preparation is equally distributed. And consequently, what happens, you can't have universities like Stanford without paying attention to academic preparation, which is not equally distributed. And that's my whole point about having the system that we have, where we have the diversity of institutions, so that people like you and me can not get into Stanford. I went to the University of Nevada, Reno is where I went. But that didn't stop me. The path I took then ended up, I did go to Stanford as a graduate student as well. So that's the strength of our system. If you're less academically prepared, you have a chance to become academically prepared, and you can achieve anything if you have that talent in this system. But it is important that the system have this incredible variety, this incredible span of institutions to give you that flexibility. Thank you for the questions. Great.
My question's for Provost Inchmindy. In your argument for legacy-aware admission policy, you enumerated the benefits, and you made the argument that it doesn't actually take that many spots away from other students. But I guess my main objection, and I'm sure that's one that's shared by many people in this room, is that legacy admissions is wrong in principle, right? We have this, I guess, moral intuition that it's wrong to discriminate on the basis of one's parents' affiliation, one's parents' income, where they went to school, and et cetera, et cetera. And that seems to be, or that practice seems to be antithetical to the, a spirit of the American dream that Dean Satz laid out in the beginning. I guess my question is, do you think there is a justification in principle to legacy admissions? If not, is it a necessary evil?
Look, it's interesting. So this is, again, inspired by your question, but one point that I did not make, but I think really should be made, is that these private institutions, Stanford, private colleges, Bryn Mawr, tiny private colleges around the country, they have developed a business model that, at least for Stanford, works. For some of these colleges, it doesn't work, but it does involve things like having an alumni community that is loyal to the institution, that is giving back to the institution. That's a very unusual thing. No other country has the kind of philanthropy that we have supporting private institutions. Now, so we've come up with a business model that works, and whose business is it to tell us to adopt some other model which may or may not work, may destroy the very model that has made Stanford what it is. So that's another point that I think needs to be made.
Can we have the poll put up? If we're going to do the poll. I do have a question just following up on this for a second, if I can intervene for one second. Because I actually have always thought there is the argument you're giving about loyalty and community, but I've always thought the strongest argument is really about the ability to have needs-blind financial aid, because you can't do anything of what David is saying unless you can have needs-blind financial aid. Why not auction spots off among the students who are in that top group? Because you might raise more money that way.
So let me tell you a story about, I want to make it absolutely anonymous. When John Hennessy and I started as president and provost, I think it was the first year or the second year, an individual, a very wealthy individual, came to us and started talking about he wanted to fund a $120 million center at Stanford. We thought, well, this is nice. You know, most of the time you don't have people coming in across the transom offering you $120 million. Well, it turned out his son was in the applicant pool that year, and we did not admit him. And we did not get the $120 million either. But so, I mean,
He was not admissible, maybe.
he was not admissible, exactly.
But I'm saying maybe you do it among the admissible group.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty non-Marxian of you.
Well, I'm just, yes.
Deborah was
Anyway, yes, next question.
Yeah, so this question's about the idea of doing the admissions by quintiles. And I'm wondering, if you take that approach, how do you avoid harming the people like at the bottom of each quintile? Like if you look at someone who's at the 19th percent versus the 21st percent, for example. Yeah.
Good question. I totally agree, kind of creaming, right? I don't think you would literally want to proceed in the way I described. That was a metaphorical. I think you would do it algorithmically, and you could get the same result and avoid the creaming. Yeah.
Thank you.
And people should be filling out the poll.
Hi, my question was for both speakers. It's interesting because although obviously your views differ, you both proposed or supported plans that make sure that essentially render the acceptance rates of students to be unequal depending on their environment that they're from. Legacy admissions, obviously, the student can't control whether they're born to a family where their parents went to Stanford or not, and that impacts and increases their acceptance rate chances. And then obviously the student can't decide whether they're born to a low-income or high-income family, and under the quintile or whatever plan you proposed, since there's more people applying from higher income areas, their acceptance rates are going to drop, right? So I'm curious of how those two plans match up with each other in terms of changing acceptance rates based on environment because of legacy and also because of income. If you could just, speak about those. Thanks.
That's such a great question. It makes me love being at Stanford. So you have to be all in on not saying that the arbiter of justice is the same acceptance rate for every kid, because the argument for not doing that, is that for some folks who have a lot of money behind them, it's much easier to get the requisite qualifications, and so you have to lower the acceptance rate to take that into account. It's absolutely right. You have to be all in on the argument that equal acceptance rate is not the arbiter of justice in this particular situation.
So before we thank before we thank our two presenters for a really stimulating discussion. These are the current poll, current answer to the poll. Would you support a more aggressive form of class-based affirmative action? For those of you who don't remember, I wouldn't have, the pre-discussion poll were 75% supporting it and 25% not supporting it. So on your way out, just
Paul, can I say something
contemplate.
about this poll, the question? So I think a lot of it depends on what you mean by affirmative action. If what you mean is going out of your way to try to recruit low-income students that would qualify for Stanford, then I would absolutely be a yes on that. If what you mean by affirmative action is, well, ignore or give less weight to academic preparedness for those students, then I think, no, it hurts them, it hurts the university. So that is an ambiguity.
No, it's definitely an ambiguous question. The idea that we could capture the richness of the issues in your discussion in a one-line question is, we don't think we can do that. Thank you so much for both of us.